Hello, everyone, and welcome to Anne Salve. This article that I'm going to be discussing for this video is about feeling triumphant amidst the battles of the journey. And to have that triumph really is about that peace that when things are abundant, right? Or when things are really having no challenge at all. Everything looks just easy peasy, and all of a sudden you're just feeling like, you can rejoice. And yet, when we really should be rejoicing is in those times where the there's just famine in anything that may be peaceful or abundant. And yet you may think to yourself, that doesn't make any sense. And I, again, have lived enough to understand that in my training, you go to the gym. There are people right now, January, you go to the gym, it's starting to fill up, especially in the evenings. There's always those, nothing wrong with it, making the resolution, good time to say, hey, I'm going to start this year strong, and they're out there in the gym and so forth. And then all of a sudden they bring their phones and they're cycling with their phones on, or, they're on their phone, and then when they could be doing another rep. And I think to myself, at least they're here. You can't down people for trying. But I say to myself that in able to really lose that weight, if that is your goal, or to gain muscle, or to lose, just lean it down. And because I know sometimes I get carried away, very competitive. I'm like, I could do those weights and so forth. Next thing you know, my arms get bigger, my back gets bigger, and that's not the look I want. And then I have to lean back down. So, life is that way. It is definitely training. And so when there is that hard times, sometimes you're out of breath and you lack gratitude. There's this famine in you. And even as adults, especially I guess as adults, as we get older, we tend to then pick up on that because our mind is taking the shortcuts of memories of that feeling of having been familiarized already with when there is a famine. It's kind of like it's not your first time. You're like, okay, this is going to be tough. And then all of a sudden you start to really have this lack of thanks for all the good things, because you then take those things for granted and you're smothered in the miseries of what it is that you're facing and all the struggles that you have to go through. And I'm always thankful to say to myself, I never want to fall back to where I was. And it's interesting because my husband and I have been together for now over 30 years. And we talk about sometimes the things that we've repressed, just they start to ooze, when you're ready to face them. It could just be a moment where you're taking a walk and boom, you're ready to release that, and you let that go, and no one probably has heard of it until that very moment that you share it with that one other person that would respect you and not judge you. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, okay, that really actually did happen, because in your mind you repress so much. As I would tell my own students, and I have mentioned this to my own children as well. They live such a sheltered life, and my younger ones as well, that for them I always used to call them suburban brats. And maybe perhaps a harsh word, but I look at their lives and I feel like, even being a teacher, they have to dig for something to talk about that is worthwhile, feeling like you are this victim. And to not their fault, because social media is like that. And sometimes you're thinking this is the only way that people will even take note of what I'm saying here, because if you're always shining in your light, after a while people are like, oh, we've heard this already, we already know, and so they don't. And sometimes you're feeling, I see this in my students, like you have to down yourself, you have to create some kind of misery for other people to then all of a sudden want to tune in to your life. And it's unfortunate, because I tell people, stay in the light and keep shining, because that is what's to inspire us all. And my husband and I we have repressed pains, from his own life to my own life. And those are things you don't want to pass on to your children. And so there are other adults that say, you should have told them this, you should have told them that. And I tell my children all the time, all my hardships and so forth. I just didn't want to. And I know my husband definitely did not want to, as well as we have both exhibited throughout our lives as parents. And for us, we're okay with that, because I know other people who have stories, or perhaps were to portray my life, probably see it from a different vantage point. For me, I didn't want to live like the victim. I didn't want to live like the person that was still there. It happened, you move on, and it made you stronger. And, you just sometimes don't have control of your surroundings. It's like you walk into it and you just find yourself there, and then you move on and say, well, that's not a room I want to stay in, right? Or the day that I was in, that's not the day I want to have tomorrow. So that you keep moving forward. And that is the only thing that you really continue to do, to then, no matter what, not had to fall back into those moments that you just never asked to have. So that real drama must stay silent. Real drama has this attitude where, it's not that I'm waking up hungry. I know that, feel that, very aware of it, very used to it. I'm good with that. I get it. It's not even not having the sustenance, the things to survive. It's literally feeling somewhat catatonic in that word, if that word fits, where you see everything happening, but you're numb from it all. Because you just start to go, this is life, this is what it is. But there's that trigger in your mind that says, but I don't have to stay here. And I don't have to have the attitude like I am miserable. You go to school and you're laughing and smiling. And I always say to myself, this one's laughing a lot louder than they should. They're smiling a lot more than necessary. And because I've lived a background of knowing that when I would go to school and I'm loud and I'm happy and, full of just this energy, I knew that those were the days sometimes where I was actually fighting the hardest inside to just get through. And so I'm so thankful for all that training, because with that training, then you truly start to understand that it is in you to then have compassion for others. You don't have to tell them. You can just be like, how's your day? And sometimes just asking that, letting them know that I see you, movie avatar, love it. You just really have to understand that there's that connection. And sometimes that's all they need, because there are times where that's all I needed, just for someone to go, just acknowledge me and really validate my presence. And I remember that, just let me be, let me go through my day. And I'm thankful that you took note to just even say hello. And so with that attitude, I always think to myself that I know there are people who may be wealthy, full of riches, and yet they act so poor, because they act as if they're lacking so much that they need more. And yet there are people who have the least, and yet they smile the most. And, I walk around and I see that they're just content, they're in their peace. And I go, well, that isn't that richness right there. Is really just having that contentment and that inner joy. And so I have to remind myself that, what side are you going to really take? And I just want to be rich with joy, rich with peace, rich with harmony. And, just that sound feeling of knowing that I can be other people's strength, rather than sometimes be so immersed in my own challenges that are trying to take me down. And so that is that mental training, where your own hurts are your own training to really get you stronger, not just for yourself, but for those around you. And so that, to me, is that feeling triumphant amidst the battles of the journey, that power perspective. It's important for all of us to know that you do have that power, that you have it within yourself to say to yourself, failure happens at moment of surrender, and you can choose to not accept failure. And I know for some people, they could beg to differ and say, no, failure is a failure. You fail, you fail. But I always think it's like, no, it's just one less way to, that you have discovered to eventually get it right. And so I think about mathematicians, and I tell my students there's no master mathematician. People could beg to differ, I get that. But there are still some problems that are left unsolved. And so it gives people an opportunity to wake up every day and try to solve that problem. And every time they come to a stumbling block and they go, oh, that's not it. And they could have worked all day and yet still have not found a solution. They know that they're going to wake up the next day to then find another direction. And to me, that is never failure. That is just the mentality that, guess what? I get to wake up the next day and try another way. And I know that that is strength building for anyone. You know, my parents' hopes are planted in me. I have seen their failures. I'm sure that in their mind, they thought was something that ended with them. And I never, ever thought it ended with them. They would never say that, oh, I have failed, but I've seen it in their eyes where they have accepted it, because you know why? They never continued. They stopped. It was almost like they just let everything go. And I never saw them persevere, whether it be a business, you know, and it went this direction and it plummeted, and I never saw them get back up and try again. And I think to myself, is it because eventually when they ran into so many different obstacles that they got tired of, you know, trying again and trying again and trying again? Or did they actually work toward it, where they got so positioned into thinking this is what's going to happen, and then you start working toward it? And to me, it's like, I will never see my parents' tries as failures. I always look at it as like, let me continue your hopes and your dreams. And so for me, as I pursued my life throughout high school, and I said, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and, you know, be a rebel. I think I talked about my prince, you know, and that the horse that I rode, the black one, beautiful, and the Laredo, the white one, beautiful, that I rode in different times in my life. And others were like, you sure you want that one? That's going to give you a lot of problems. And it was almost like, now you're convincing me it was made for me. Because I really always felt like, I understand the rebel. I understand the one that's going to make it difficult, because I am going to overcome this one since I've overcome the other things. And so when I graduated from high school and I got to speak not only in, you know, on behalf of my graduating class and also in my academy as the president, I was just, you know, besides myself of ever thinking that there was any other way. It was more of like, it's going to happen because I see that it will, you know, and it wasn't in a vain way. It was more of, you get used to training yourself in that mentality. And so going through, you know, college and having my first child, my freshman year. And I remember there was a time when I was getting certified in teaching, and they were like, you know, you may have to take another year of this. And I just took summer and never had a summer break. And I finished in 4 years with a 4-year degree and, you know, my BA in psychology as well as my teaching degree. And it's funny because I remember being at a reunion and someone saying to me, you know, you're here and we were like down here. I never thought that. I always thought everyone was here with me. Like we were just doing us, you know? And so, you know, and somehow probably I do come out sometimes as arrogant. Sometimes you see people who are like doing what they got to do to get to where they need to get to. And you probably think, who do you think they are, you know? And yet I bet you those people who are working so hard are too busy worrying about what other people think, because they are their own worst enemy. And don't let me get me, you know, like with Pink. And, that was me, you know. I mean, how else did I finish my master's with children? And I remember my oldest walking over into me and saying, you know, how much longer this? Because I had a sacrifice. You know, I could tell that while he was talking to me, I wasn't hearing him while I'm writing this paper, because I'd written it up in my head while I took them to the park and I spent my day with them and I loved every moment. And I'm writing this paper, and all of a sudden it was the moment that he had to have this conversation with me, and I'm half hearing, if not even hardly hearing, what he has to say, because everything that he had to say mattered to my heart and I wanted to hear, but yet I had a paper that was, you know, due, and I had to send it in. And so you make sacrifices. And when my son, I remember, said that, it kills you, right? Inside there's a piece of you that gets torn up, and yet you say to yourself, but if I don't do this, then I'm going to show him perhaps that I'll never finish, and I'll be darned if that's going to ever happen. This has got to be done. And you just have to sometimes know that greater sacrifices come without ever being spoken. And just having faith that one day, or he'll have forgotten that he'll be a better parent than I am, and know how to juggle that even better, because you're just never always going to be 100% to everything that matters in your life, most especially those that you love dearest. But what they need to understand is you do it for them. It doesn't matter, right? Like, you just do what you got to do, and you just have to have faith that everything will make sense in the long run, just not at that moment. And so I am really thankful I have been stubborn all my life. I'm really thankful to know that to err does not mean that it is failure, that it just means it's, you know, you get a chance to do it right again, and just keep going and going until you eventually get it right. And the moment of surrender is the moment that I move on. But I'm hoping that I've instilled enough so that my own children and my children's children, whoever gets to see, you know, how the power of perspective that I have instilled, would then continue to be even better than I am at it. And that there won't be in a generation where they mess it all up and then we have to start at zero again. That my generations will continue to prosper with the mindset that no matter what, there's always going to be an opportunity to do this better if I didn't do it too well today. And that perseverance that gets to be instilled will let them overcome any drama. They won't be even talking about anything that they're running into. They're just going to handle it, and they're going to grow from it and become stronger. And they will model it for everyone else, because at every time you have a success, and the harder the struggle to get there, I think you actually open eyes and open hearts and open minds even more, because it gives people hope. It gives them the idea that if they can do it, then so can I. And you really hope to instill that. And so with this said, feeling triumphant amidst the battles of the journey is important. Always rejoice. Always know that you would not be going through it if you could not get through it, right? You are that person that can overcome, no matter how hard, no matter how long it may take. You will see the light again, and you will be that light again, and you will continue to illuminate no matter what. In the words of my mother, God bless us all. Thank you again for listening. We will see you next time.